No one anticipated the ensuing uproar when the world behind the glittering walls of Buckingham Palace was finally exposed. Every day was a delicate ballet of perfection, secrecy, and unwritten regulations for the maids who worked in its magnificent halls. There were pressures so great and unrelenting behind the glistening chandeliers and shiny floors that some people could no longer stand them. However, what was the secret reason behind these devoted employees' departure from one of the most famous homes in the world? They never anticipated hearing this startling tale. The unthinkable pressure maids face beneath the glistening gold and chandeliers of Buckingham Palace, a secret world of rigorous regulations, high standards, and unrelenting accuracy quietly flourishes. Few people get a taste of the high-stakes, controlled atmosphere beneath the opulent exterior where every detail is painstakingly handled and excellence is not optional but required, while tourists marvel at the polished floors and centuries of grandeur. Despite being mostly hidden, this aspect of the palace is crucial to its classic elegance and structure. A unique and illuminating look into this hidden world is provided by Anne Simmons, who spent over 10 years of her life cleaning the palace's 70-75. Her encounters reveal a world very different from the media's portrayals of royal splendor and travel brochures. A mop or cloth was never merely a cleaning instrument in Anne's hands, rather it was a component of a methodical system in which each movement had significance. She says that the palace is a location where even the slightest mistake can have far-reaching effects. Cleaning in this hidden world went beyond dusting or polishing. It was an exacting, almost ritualistic practice. Every movement adhered to an unwritten code that was derived from centuries of expectations, rank, and tradition. Employees were productive and silent, anticipating demands before they were communicated. A misplaced object, a smeared surface, or a procedure violation could have consequences that extend well beyond the work at hand. In this case, maintaining the integrity and legacy of Buckingham Palace was more important than maintaining aesthetic. Anne's descriptions depict life with unrelenting accuracy. Even the easiest tasks required meticulous attention to detail. Strict formulas had to be followed when wringing mop tension, folding cloths with care, and mixing cleaning solution. Every activity followed established protocols, combining ceremonial observance of tradition with pragmatic necessity. Patience, perseverance, and a thorough understanding of the palace's rhythm were necessary for the task. Every day for Anne and her co-workers was a delicate balancing act between efficiency and respect, speed and perfection, and secrecy and exposure. The strain of silent observation was in addition to the physical labor. Employees knew all the time that what they did was never really secret. Senior household member, a guest, or even a fleeting royal gaze could disclose both skill and mistakes. Vigilance was a survival skill in this setting, not an option. Maintaining a private suite or cleaning a vast hall required meticulousness and discipline, which became second nature. According to Anne Simmons's perspective, Buckingham Palace is a real, breathing ecology rather than just a glamorous symbol. There, every polished sweep and motion has significance. Grandeur and elegance coexist with rigorous order, and centuries of tradition are upheld by the hard effort of those who work behind the scene. Cleaning becomes an art in the palace's secret passageways, and the maids who maintain its excellence face hardships that few could bear. What other startling details about life inside the gilded walls did Simmons divulge, though? Let's investigate. The tight cleaning guidelines, even the cleaning equipment, is subject to strict regulations within Buckingham Palace, where luxury and history collide. Anne Simmons disclosed that several commonplace goods were severely prohibited. A disposable wet wipe, for example, which might seem like a minor element in a typical home, could not get through these regal walls. King Charles personally backed the move to outright ban wet wipes even if they were labeled as flushable. Such stringent regulations were justified by both pragmatic and moral considerations. Wet wipes frequently resulted in plumbing damage, obstructing the palace's complex piping system and necessitating expensive, ongoing repair. However, a more profound environmental factor was also taken into account. Single-use items just did not align with the centuries-old traditions of Buckingham Palace, which had started to embrace sustainability. Reusable clothing consequently became the norm. These cloths were less wasteful, kinder to surfaces, and consistent with the household's dedication to long-term care and accountability. Cleaning procedures in Buckingham Palace were as exacting as the opulent wall. Because they may scratch precious materials like granite, marble, and stainless steel, commonplace instruments like steel wool were prohibited. Instead, they used warm water, vinegar, lemon juice, and natural treatments that were specifically designed to clean dirt without leaving any residue, along with soft microfiber towel. From kitchens to halls, every surface needed to keep up the immaculate image that centuries of royal custom required. Even the most delicate techniques turned into acts of discipline in this secret society, maintaining beauty and honoring the palace's legendary history. Anne saw the task as much more than convenience or speed. In Buckingham Palace, cleaning required accuracy, planning, and sustained care. Every movement was significant, every instrument served a function, and every item was selected to maintain the palace's aesthetic appeal and practicality. Her work is a difficult balance, she said. One mistake may have repercussions, possibly resulting in harm that members of the royal family themselves would observe in addition to the workers. Even the most basic cleaning duties held great significance in Buckingham Palace. Employees were supposed to carry out their responsibilities with the utmost care, deference, and accuracy while utilizing only authorized tools and methods. Although these regulations may seem excessive to outsiders, they protected the palace's magnificence, heritage, and flawless appearance. However, rumors suggest that this could be the true cause of several maids' departure from the castle. Furthermore, perfection was required. It was a way of life that made sure every area mirrored the exacting standards of a famous royal home, where every little thing helped to uphold centuries of custom, style, and distinction. Anne's disclosures provide a unique window into a world where even seemingly simple duties like cleaning a sink, polishing a countertop, or sweeping a floor took discipline, knowledge, and talent. Cleaning was more than a chore in this setting. It was an act of devotion, an art form, and a daily dedication to upholding a legendary institution. Every cloth, handmade solution, and exact sweep demonstrated the unwavering pursuit of excellence at Buckingham Palace. The burden placed on the maids by these stringent regulations may be too much to handle. But what was the real picture of day-to-day living behind the palace's glistening walls? Let's investigate. Inside Buckingham Palace. At first appearance, working at Buckingham Palace appears like the job of dreams. An almost enchanted look into royal life is provided by the centuries of history, golden hallways, and brilliant chandeliers. Working here may seem like a privilege with style and meaning to many. The reality inside these gates, however, is far more demanding than most people could have imagined. As Anne Simmons disclosed, every day is filled with unnoticed demands, constant inspection, and expectations that don't allow for mistakes for those working in the palace. Buckingham Palace was more than just a house, according to Anne. Every work in this living museum required perfect precision. Even small errors could damage centuries-old furniture or interfere with the complex routines of the palace. From cleaning valuable artifacts to polishing counters, every action counted in this universe, and a single mistake might have far-reaching effects. Buckingham Gate is the public entrance to Buckingham Palace, and you'll need to turn left here. More than technical competence was needed for the work, which had an impact on the palace's legacy and the royal household's reputation. It required discipline, patience, and a deep regard for tradition. A larger culture where every little detail counted was reflected in even seemingly insignificant regulations, such as the rigorous prohibitions on steel wool and wet wipes. Steel wool ran the risk of damaging marble and polished stainless steel, and disposable wipes, even though they were advertised as flushable, could block the palace plumbing. What would seem like a small restriction in a typical home was a non-negotiable requirement in the palace that was intended to protect the structure and its centuries-old legacy. Cleaning was more than just a task to Anne and her co-workers. It developed into an art form. Focus and regard were required for every movement, swipe, and application of meticulously prepared cleaners. They meticulously preserved the palace's precious interiors, using warm water, vinegar, and lemon solutions, as well as delicate microfiber towels. Aware that every activity helped to uphold a faultless, timeless level of perfection, every task had weight, and every tool had a purpose. Discipline was essential in this secret realm. It was necessary. Employees were very conscious of how their efforts directly influenced the palace's immaculate appearance. The illusion of greatness could be jeopardized by a tiny omission in a cabin, a poorly swept hallway, or a table polished too hard. Even the smallest gesture had significance. A side of Buckingham Palace that is rarely seen by the general public is revealed by Anne's story. Beneath the opulence and historical significance is a workplace characterized by diligence, attention to detail, and a steadfast adherence to tradition. The expectations, the restrictions, and the accuracy are all a part of a tradition that molds the lives of those who serve and leaves them with duties that are difficult for outsiders to completely understand. Perfection is not just encouraged in this world, it's to be anticipated. Cleaning is a show of devotion, expertise, and respect for the past rather than a mundane chore. Centuries of history and the palace's immaculate appearance are preserved in every move. Can employees, however, consistently fulfill these high standards? What occurs when the pressure becomes too much? Let's examine the dispute that revealed tensions concealed within the palace. The decline in popularity of Lady Susan Hussey. One of the royal household's most dependable and long-serving aides, Lady Susan Hussey was 83 when she became the center of a scandal that immediately attracted international notice. An incident at a Buckingham Palace reception, which was intended to honor organizations that combat violence against women, abruptly eclipsed Lady Susan's reputation, which had been built on decades of service and strong relationships to Queen Elizabeth. What started out as a night of unity and recognition descended into tension when Ngozi Fulani, CEO of Sista Space, claimed that Lady Susan interrogated her in a way that Fulani described as intrusive and absolutely breathtaking, focusing more on her personal history than the event itself. Fulani was obviously uncomfortable after the incident, and the public's response was prompt and unyielding. Lady Susan abruptly ended a decades-long chapter of royal service by expressing her sincere regret for the sorrow caused and resigning from her honorary position immediately. Susan Hussey, lady, apologizes to Ngozi Fulani. We are told that the meeting was friendly and understanding. In addition to confirming the resignation, Buckingham Palace released a statement denouncing the conduct and making it clear that such behavior would not be accepted. The prompt action demonstrated the monarchy's understanding of the incident's wider social and cultural ramifications, especially with regard to race, identity, and inclusion in its historically privileged setting. A representative for Lady Susan's godson, Prince William, also spoke out about the incident, describing it as extremely disheartening and restating that racism has no place in our culture. In addition to distancing himself from the incident, his remarks emphasize the principles he adheres to as he gets ready for leadership roles in the future. An ironic and disturbing element was added by the occurrence, which took place during a reception promoting domestic abuse, a topic that Queen Camilla supported. The evening's intended message was diminished as a conflict of bias and perception dominated a night designed to honor activism and support for vulnerable women. The effects were felt outside the royal walls. Public personalities like Paul Scully, a government minister, have drawn attention to the more subtle types of discrimination that occur in day-to-day interactions. He considered his personal experiences as a person of Burmese heritage and saw that informal presumptions and invasive inquiries might expose prejudices just as clearly as overt discrimination. A greater tension was revealed by the incident. The modern standards of fairness and social consciousness hold everyone accountable, even those who are firmly rooted in privilege and tradition. Therefore, Lady Susan's resignation was more than just a personal setback. It came to represent the monarchy's struggle to strike a balance between societal norms of the present day and centuries-old customs. Having been a close confidant of the late Queen and a member of the royal household since 1960, her decline in popularity proved that tenure and reputation. Let's be clear about this. I have not received a response from Buckingham Palace. I have not received a response from cannot absolve anyone of responsibility. Regardless of rank or hierarchy, Fulani's poise and public position demonstrated the strength of standing up for what is rightfully yours and demanding respect. In the end, the event demonstrates that, in spite of its magnificence, Buckingham Palace is subject to partiality, human error, and examination. However, how do those around a maid respond when she is pushed over her breaking point by palace pressures? Let's find out the startling fact. Buckingham Palace is not an exception to the rule that even the most orderly workplaces can have periods when anxiety seeps out. There is a world of unseen pressures, high standards, and constant inspection behind the palace's glittering chandeliers, spotless floors, and ceremonial rooms. Few people outside the royal household could imagine the regulations that the staff that runs it must abide by. And in December, the secret intensity of royal work was exposed as this high-pressure environment momentarily erupted outside the palace wall. Approximately 50 palace employees reportedly attended a Christmas party at London's All Bar 1. The pre-party cocktails at Buckingham Palace gave workers a unique opportunity to unwind and mingle after long shifts, and the evening started off innocently enough. However, what started out as a fun celebration swiftly turned into anarchy. The Sun claims that a housemaid destroyed glasses, punched the bar manager, and was then taken into custody. An evening of celebration turned into a public display, bringing to light the tremendous demands of working for one of the most prominent families in the world. In a formal statement, the Metropolitan Police verified the incident. On December 10, officers were dispatched to the Victoria Street bar after receiving complaints that a patron had attempted to assault a staff member and damaged property. A 24-year-old woman was arrested on charges of criminal damage, common assault, and drunken and disorderly conduct. She was given a penalty notice for disorder and discharged the next evening. The response from Buckingham Palace was measured and solemn. According to a spokeswoman, the event was casual and not an official palace Christmas party, but it did include domestic personnel who had gone to the palace for an early evening reception. According to the statement, the facts will be thoroughly examined, a strict disciplinary procedure will be followed with regard to specific employees, and the necessary measures will be implemented. This episode gives a fascinating look into the hidden reality of royal life while also demonstrating the institution's dedication to responsibility and decorum. Behind the scenes, staff members face a great deal of responsibility, despite the public's perception of Buckingham Palace as a perfect representation of grandeur and history. Stress can build up quickly in a setting that is characterized by long hours, exact routines, and ongoing adherence to protocol. Because personal and professional lives connect in ways that are rarely visible to outsiders, even a social gathering meant to promote relaxation might turn into a source of stress. The episode also emphasizes how carefully public image and internal discipline must be balanced. Both on and off duty, employees are expected to maintain the palace's high standards. Even casual events are significant, and one poor decision can have a negative impact on one's reputation, perception, and career. Being a royal employee involves much more than just official duties. It also involves maintaining one's calm while being closely watched. The Christmas party event ultimately functions as a warning story and a window into the human side of Buckingham Palace. In the grand scheme of royal affairs, the arrest of a young housemaid may seem insignificant, but it revealed the daily struggles that employees endure. Behind the glitz and glamour of Buckingham Palace, employees face constant pressure, inspection, and high standards. However, what measures stop events like the infamous Christmas party? How do palace maids deal with these high expectations? Let's explore the stringent, little-known regulations that control life behind the glistening exterior and behind the palace wall. Staff life at Buckingham Palace was far more structured and rigorous than the general public may have thought. The Queen's former chef, Darren McGrady, compared the palace to an isolated hamlet where all activities, interactions, and tasks were strictly regulated by a strict hierarchy and set of regulations. While the residence itself was divided into levels for housemaids, footmen, and culinary workers, male and female personnel lived in different wings. It was extremely prohibited to enter certain regions without permission, and even small breaches may have dire repercussions. Although this exacting discipline was necessary to maintain the palace's seamless operation, it put a great deal of strain on the people who lived and worked there. Every error has the potential to cause harm to precious surfaces, upend centuries-old customs, or result in official disciplinary action. In order to balance long hours with a constant awareness of protocol, decorum, and the historical significance of their surroundings, staff members were expected to maintain unshakable focus. McGrady clarified that the organization was not the only reason for the gender and function-based personnel division. It upheld the palace's meticulously planned social order and strengthened discipline. With their own routines, duties, and expectations, the floors and wings were nearly separate universes. Workers soon discovered that even little procedure violations might have a significant impact on the palace's operations, timetables, and even co-workers' daily lives. Additionally, because they lived inside the palace gates, work and personal life were inextricably linked. Employees were required to behave professionally at all times and were always on duty, whether formally or informally, even though their accommodation and meals were provided. It was impossible to avoid the prying eyes of superiors, co-workers, or even the unsaid influence of royal custom, which required deference, prudence, and accuracy in all that they did. McGrady also emphasized the environment's psychological demand. In addition to performing physical labor, workers had to decipher a convoluted social order, read nonverbal cues, and predict the requirements of a ceremonial and formal home. The pressure remained steady. Even minor mistakes could have far-reaching effects that affect schedules, reputations, and the efficient running of the home. In this unique environment, privilege and responsibility coexisted in everyday life. Few people could ever experience the world of history, luxury, and culture that the staff had access to. However, it was accompanied with an unwavering demand for excellence. The palace's strict standards had to be reflected in every hallway traveled, every meal served, and every surface cleaned. In the end, Macready's observations show that beneath the gilded exterior of Buckingham Palace is a very regimented, orderly setting where customs control not just the monarchy but also the lives of those who work for it. Every moment is shaped by accuracy, hierarchy, and attentiveness there, and the unseen weight of tradition and custom guarantees that employees live in a completely different reality from the one that the general public sees. Every action in Buckingham Palace has significance, every assignment necessitates accuracy, and life revolves with unrelenting order. However, what is the extent of these regulations? Let's now explore the covert demands, unspoken regulations, and unrelenting accuracy that push palace chefs to their limits. Within the Queen's kitchen, the rigor of Buckingham Palace living went much beyond formal corridors, glitzy rituals, and rigid domestic rule. It went all the way to the center of the royal kitchen. Working here was a world unlike any professional culinary setting, according to former Queen chef Darren Macready. Taste and presentation were not the only considerations in any meal prepared for Her Majesty. Centuries of history could be ruined by even the slightest mistake in this performance, which required discipline, precision, and high standards. The choice of ingredients in this rarefied kitchen was based on both quality and adherence to the monarchy's principle. Produce grown locally and indigenously, frequently straight from royal estates like Balmoral, was revered. River fish, garden vegetables, fresh berries, and animals bred on estates were more than just food. The Queen's ties to her homeland and her admiration for the natural wealth of Britain were reflected in them. Every item had to be prepared with care to bring out its flavor, freshness, and seasonal character in order to be properly displayed. Nothing on the platter was ever chosen carelessly. It requires in-depth knowledge, meticulous attention to detail, and an awareness of the symbolic meaning of presentation. However, some ingredients were severely prohibited. For example, palace cuisine was never permitted to use garlic. The strong spice has no place in royal meals, although being widely used in restaurants and even home kitchens. In order to strictly adhere to palace regulations, chefs had to practice self-control and repress their own culinary inclinations and inventiveness. The royal kitchen required that personal preferences be subordinated to domestic norms, in contrast to many kitchens where chefs are free to experiment with flavors, methods, and plating. Tradition, convention, and the implicit expectation of excellence governed every choice, no matter how small. The presentation was equally important. Every dish had to be expertly plated, exhibiting both expertise and deference to the Queen's demands. An uneven garnish or an uneven flavor combination could be interpreted as irresponsibility and a violation of the household's fastidious culture. Taste was insufficient on its own. Each dish's symbolic meaning and visual impact were significant. According to Macready, the kitchen was a reflection of the palace itself, where accuracy was paramount. Every movement was significant, and the work ethic was defined by adherence to centuries-old customs. This rigorous discipline was not limited to cooking methods. Chefs and kitchen workers were constantly watched, knowing that any mistake might not only ruin service, but also be a betrayal of Queen Elizabeth II, her family, and the organization they worked for. Patience, concentration, and a readiness to repress individual ambition in favor of group brilliance were necessary to withstand the constant pressure. Mistakes were more than just mistakes. They might have insulted reputation and legacy. In the end, Macready's observation provides a window into one of the little-known causes of the extreme strain that palace maids endure and the reasons why some decide to quit Buckingham Palace. Like the castle itself, the royal kitchen required complete adherence to tradition, meticulous workmanship, and unflinching dedication. Service came before creativity, even though it was valued elsewhere. Excellence must not be compromised, and individual expression had to yield to convention. Every meal demonstrated devotion, every dish required self-control, and every moment exposed the tremendous demands of working at one of the most famous homes in the world. However, did the wages really correspond with the demands that the palace maids had to meet? Let's reveal the startling truth. The startling compensation for the glitz of Buckingham Palace. The reality for some of Buckingham Palace's employees stands in stark contrast to the palace's grandeur, history, and legendary reputation. This secret aspect was revealed by a recent job posting for a live-in housekeeper. only £7.97 per hour was given, which is much less than the national minimum wage for adults over the age of 22. Given the luxury of the royal household, the announced yearly salary of £19,900, which included housing and meals, immediately drew criticism from labor unions and others who referred to the pay as outrageous. Employers may legally deduct lodging expenses from employees' pay, up to a daily cap of £8.70 or a weekly cap of £60.90. This includes a 15% employer pension contribution, which the palace described as part of a competitive pact. However, the discrepancy between the actual compensation and the prestige of working in Buckingham Palace attracted public attention, underscoring the difficulties in appreciating domestic labor in wealthy houses. In response, Buckingham Palace emphasized that the advertised hourly wage was inaccurate and that the whole compensation, including housing and meals, is still competitive when compared to comparable live-in positions in London. Critics countered that despite these benefits, the pay is insufficient to compensate for the dedication, talent and discipline needed to work at one of the most renowned homes in the world. The strain that comes with working in a palace is highlighted in the advertised. From keeping ancient furnishings to cleaning sumptuous hallways, staff members live and work in an atmosphere that values accuracy and discipline. Because employees must follow the palace procedures and be present at all times, living on site further enhances responsibility. A hidden aspect of life beyond the palace gates, that is rarely known to the general public, is revealed by the meager remuneration. In contrast to these expectations, the wider problems that live-in domestic workers in wealthy homes experience are also brought to light by this dispute. Despite being frequent, legal allowances for accommodation deductions can cause workers to receive lower salaries than they would otherwise, including